round of applause, welcome Vaseem Khan.
Thank you so much, Brett. Thank you so much. Right, well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So the last time I was at this festival, there was a mix-up with the hotel, and I ended up having to share a very small room with a crime writer friend of mine. So to prevent any of that happening, I had to murder him before I came here. All right, so we're going to have a fast and furious session because we're going to cover 500 years of history, 3 different continents, and about a dozen different books. So if you get whiplash, don't blame me. Right, so let's start with a bit about myself. So I was born and grew up in the UK, but my parents were from the subcontinent. Here they are. They've both passed on now. This is back in the 1970s. I grew up in East London, but at the age of 17, I wanted to be a writer. I was reading Terry Pratchett's Discworld, and I wrote a novel, sent it into some agents, told my parents I'm not going to university because I'm going to be a rich and famous writer. So you can imagine what my Asian parents thought of that particular plan. Anyway, the book was rubbish, so it didn't go anywhere, and I had to study accounts, became a management consultant. And then one day, my boss in East London, whose name was Terry Brewer, came into the office, looked around, walked over to me, and he said, "Vaz, you look like you can speak Indian. Would you like to come to India with me?" He was a very tongue-in-cheek guy, and we ended up going out to Bombay in 1997. And here we are in Bombay, looking like a pair of Sicilian gangsters. And there he is, Terry. And I spent 10 amazing years in India, watching the country change from this pre-industrial nation to this near global superpower that we think of India as today, with globalization and wealth coming into the country, but at the same time plenty of legacy issues and problems. And when I came back to the UK, I decided I wanted to put all of that lovely stuff into a book. And bear in mind, I've been writing for 20 odd years unsuccessfully by now, sent in 7 different novels, got 100 rejection letters. So my childhood dream was, if not dead, it was on life support. And I was as amazed as anybody else when that book was published. It was called The Unexpected Inheritance of Inspector Chopra, about a middle-aged policeman in his mid-40s who's forced into early retirement, but he decides to take on one last case of a poor boy murdered in Mumbai, or modern Bombay. But what also happens to him on that last day is that he inherits a baby elephant. And what do you do if someone hands you a baby elephant and you live on the 15th floor of a tower block, as most middle-class Indians do? Well, you have to read the book to find out. But, you know, a lot of people ask me, I mean, what were you smoking when you decided to put an elephant into a crime novel? I have no idea. Long in the past. I was, as I said, amazed that it was published. It was very successful. I ended up on BBC Breakfast talking to millions of people about it. It was published around the world in 17 languages, and I ended up writing 5 books in that particular series, looking at all aspects of this modern India. When I finished the 5th one, I decided that I wanted to understand where this modern India came from, because although this is a country that's thousands of years old, the truth is that the modern India we see today is largely a function of that period after India became independent in 1947. And that was following 300 years of the British rule, because the British presence on India altered the course, the trajectory of the nation. And so I went to my publishers and I said, I know these books are selling, but would you mind if I wrote a historical series set just after Indian independence? And, you know, they ummed and they ahed and they cried because, you know, when books are selling, they don't really want you to do anything different. But I was adamant because I was fascinated by that history, and we'll look at some of that right now. So I ended up doing a new series, writing a new series, historical crime fiction. And for me, the inciting fact was this. I thought that all of the Brits, you guys, left in 1947, but you didn't. Apparently, there were tens of thousands of Brits who chose to remain in India, either because they'd been born there, or they had businesses there, or they couldn't imagine coming back to cold, wet, miserable England. And many, many of them, thousands of them, were in Bombay, which was the most cosmopolitan city in the country. And so I decided to set a book in 1950, 3 years after Indian independence. The country is in a very turbulent state, the horrors of partition, when India was divided into 3 pieces, India, Pakistan, and East Pakistan, which would later become Bangladesh. All of that is still hanging over the country. And so I decided to write this book, Midnight at Malabar House, which is 1950, the city of Bombay, and I introduce India's first female police detective, Inspector Persis Wadia. And she qualifies, nobody knows what to do with her, so they stick her in Bombay's smallest police station, Malabar House, with all the rest of the rejects and the misfits. So it's a very slow horses kind of setup. So, and the Times of India said, think Mick Heron in Bombay. And he's a friend of mine, so that quite tickled him. And then she's working with an English forensic scientist named Archie Blackfinch, who's come to Bombay to help set up their own forensic science lab. And an English diplomat in the city is murdered, and the case lands in their lap, and off they go. And these books they're murder mysteries. They're written in a sort of golden age style in the sense that the sex and the swearing and the violence is offstage. It's about the puzzle, it's about the characters, and it is very much about the setting and the history of that particular period. But it's also about what happened in India after the British left. How does a nation come to grips with taking over the reins after 300 years of someone else calling the shots? And the answers were not very easy for India to deal with. So the book ended up winning the Historical Dagger, which is a global award for this kind of fiction. And so far, I've ended up writing, 5 in the series that are out, and the 6th one, The Edge of Darkness, comes out a bit later. And again, each of these books is a murder mystery first and foremost. It's entertainment, that's what crime fiction should be, but they're also an exploration of history that I wish that I had been taught in school, because it was my favorite subject, and I love learning about Tudor England, and I love learning about the World Wars, but I wish we'd learned a bit more in my school about the 300 years that the Brits spent in India. And often what I say to people is this, that because I was born and raised in this country, but I've lived there, I have a more balanced perspective. So not every, and I say this when I do talks, not every Brit that went to India was a sinner, and not every Indian was a saint. Because many Brits went out to India to join the civil service or to work in the army because they were told this is the way to, this is a good future, young man. And many went on missionary work. But at the same time, many of the Indians engaged in partition, the riots that happened in partition, and 1 million Indians died. It wasn't the Brits who killed them. It was Indians killing other Indians. Anyway, at the end of each of these books, I put in a couple of pages of the real nuggets of history that I've included in the books, and people who read these from around the world, they write to me and say, that cannot possibly be true. So for instance, simple fact that I include in one of these books, the fingerprint classification system that we use in the West was invented by 2 Indians during the Raj in Calcutta. But because they were working under the supervision of an Englishman named Henry, it was called the Henry classification system, and then it was transferred to Scotland Yard, and then from there around the world. So those kind of things end up in these books. I call it historical correctionism. Anyway, let's talk about that India a little bit. So where did that turbulent India come from? So back when India became independent, there were 300 million Indians, and there's 1.5 billion now, so you can see how busy they've been over the last 70-odd years. This chap is Jawaharlal Nehru. He took over the Congress party after Gandhi was assassinated, and he was dealing with all sorts of issues like communal violence, feudal agitation, because he was trying to take land from the feudal landowners and give it to the poor people, and nobody likes giving up their cash. And of course, he had the noisy neighbors in Pakistan. And what led to this tumultuous India? Well, let's start at the beginning. So the Brits arrived in the early 1600s at Surat, and to begin with, everything was lovely. They went to the Mughal courts, and the Mughal emperors were so wealthy and powerful, and they weren't really fussed about this small country from across the seas. And some of these early adventurers, they learned the language, they took Indian wives, and it was all very friendly. That all changed about a century and a half later. So many of you would have heard of Robert Clive of India. Well, Clive was a buccaneer and an adventurer for working for the East India Company. And what he did was, he was quite a clever chap. He managed to engineer a fight with the Nawab of Bengal. Now, Bengal is a state in India, and it was not just one of the wealthiest places in India, but one of the wealthiest places in the world at the time. And what Clive did is he bribed the Nawab's generals to lose. And so they lost. He took over Bengal, he started taxing everybody, and then that was reproduced all around the nation, so that after a while, the East India Company became the de facto rulers of the subcontinent. Next big hiccup, this. So this is how history is. This is an example of how history is dependent very much on your perspective. So in British textbooks, this is called the Indian Mutiny, but in India, it's called the Indian Rebellion. So this happened in 1857 when this chap who's on the postage stamp in India, his name is Mangal Pandey, who was a soldier in the British Army in India, he kicked off this rebellion. And what had happened was that they wanted to change the rifles, and the cartridges in those rifles were coated in pig fat. And so none of the Hindus who are vegetarians wanted to, because you had to bite the cartridge to put it in the gun. They didn't want to bite it, and the Muslims obviously don't eat pigs, so they didn't want to bite it. So Mangal Pandey, who was upset with lots of other things, took advantage of this, started a fight, ended up in a massive campaign. Lots of people were murdered, and this particular place, a place called Bibigarh, a whole bunch of white people were murdered, mainly women and children, stuffed into that well, which then led to a massive response from the Crown to put down the rebellion. And after that, the Crown said, look, East India Company, you're a bit useless, you can't control this, so we're taking over. So that's when the Raj officially begins in 1857. And so things went along for a while like this, and then this happened in 1919, the Jallianwala Bagh incident. So this is in a city, this is a walled garden in the city of Amritsar in the state of Punjab in North India, and these 900 men, women and children, unarmed, had gathered for a festival, but also to quietly protest the ongoing presence of the British. And then a chap called Brigadier Dyer decided to come along and open fire on them. And such was the horror incited by this incident that it galvanized people like Gandhi and Nehru, and it really gave the independence movement a lift. And Dyer himself, this is the man himself on the left there, and there he is, played by I think it's Edward Fox in the film Gandhi, uncle of another famous modern politician. And so he was not censured. So Brigadier Dyer was not actually censured at the time, but when word got back that he'd actually fired on unarmed women, children, then he was, he faced a bit of censure, but he was never really taken to task for what he did there. Then we move on to World War II, and the Quit India campaign is now fully underway, and you've got Gandhi with his friend Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who would later become the Prime Minister of Pakistan. So these two chappies were lawyers, and they actually trained in London. But then they ended up meeting up again in India and spearheading the independence movement before falling out. And they fell out because Jinnah wanted his own country for Muslims. And in 1946, he called for a direct action day. And he basically told Muslims to come out into the streets and go on strike. But of course, if you tell Indians to come out into the streets, it always ends in a riot. And that's what happened, unfortunately, and it ended up with 4,000 people murdering each other in the space of a few days, and the British were powerless to stop it. And it was at this point that they realized they could not stop the partition of the country. And so they sent in their big guns. They sent in this chappie, Lord Mountbatten. And Lord Mountbatten, to be fair to him, was a bit of an idiot. He didn't really know what he was doing, but he didn't care very much. He was just given a task. So he went over there and he said, right, we're going to sort this out. We're just going to get a map. And he's got his cartographer to just draw a line here and here. And then he said, right, job done. But of course, it wasn't planned out very well at all. And so the upshot of all of this non-planning was the fact that millions of Indians had to move. Muslims had to go towards the newly Pakistan and East Pakistan. Hindus and Sikhs had to come the other way. And then rumors began to spread about people rioting and killing each other. And then it just went completely out of control. So you had whole trains like this that were either set on fire or people boarding them with knives, weapons, and just murdering everybody in sight. And they'd often turn up at the train station and there'd just be bodies from first carriage to last. So quite a horrible, horrible situation. Anyhow, back to something more fun. So my books are set in 1950 in Bombay, and Bombay is, of course, known as India's city of dreams. It's actually not very old. It's about 500 years old, and it was a series of marshy islands. And then the Portuguese turned up, and they built a bay there, and they called it Good Bay. And in Portuguese, that's Bombay. That's why it's called Bombay. And then about 100 years or so later, they gifted it to King Charles when he married Catherine of Braganza. And King Charles wasn't very impressed with this bog in the middle of nowhere, so he leased it to the East India Company for a very tiny amount of money. And the East India Company silted in the marsh, built the railway network, and then invited people from all over the empire to come and settle. And it became the gateway to India. But of course, it's more famously known as being the home of Bollywood, India's ludicrous film industry. And I say that having lived there and being very affectionate towards the industry. But have you ever seen in films where you've got an action scene going on and a car chase, and then the car goes under a truck and the top gets chopped off, right? Now imagine that done with a horse. I mean, how does that even work? Like you're a rider on a horse and then he goes underneath with the horse and then the horse gets back up again. It's just, but I've seen that. Or a person catching a bullet in his teeth. Anyway. So Bombay was known as a city of jazz and good times. It's because a lot of Americans bands would come to the major hotels like the Ambassador and the Taj, and then they would talk to the local politicians, and so they invented something called Indo-Jazz, which became absolutely all the rage at all of these places. And you'd have these big gala functions in the 50s where all the expats, the stayers-on as they were known, the people who stayed, the Brits and the Europeans who stayed would gather for these soirees, and everybody got into it. Okay, that's not really Gandhi, obviously. He was too busy leading a revolution and doing other things to... Oh, actually, he was dead by this stage, so... I just love that picture, so I put it in. A lot of people ask me, why did I choose to write a female detective, right? Because obviously I'm not. Inspector Persis Wadia. And one reason is that it's much more interesting for me as a writer, but it's been much more interesting from the letters I get for readers, because Persis is not only battling these murder cases, trying to solve these murder cases, but she's in a very paternalistic environment. The police institution is incredibly misogynistic. She's the only female police detective in the entire country, and she's facing this kind of messaging. So I don't know if you can see this, but it's a mother telling her daughter that she can be an ideal housewife by learning how to sew. So Persis it doesn't believe in any of this, right? So she's a very determined woman, a very intelligent woman who usually knows she's the smartest woman in the room. She's so determined to succeed that she often rides roughshod over the rules and social niceties, which, you know what, I think is fine. We love our maverick male cops, right? So why can't an Indian, a woman police officer be that way as well? But I was inspired by several amazing stories from that era, and I love this one. So this is India's first female pilot, Surya Thakral, and what happened was that she married into a family of pilots. Her father-in-law saw that she was interested, so he trained her up, and he took her to an airfield, and the story goes that he said to her, if you can take this gypsy moth up and down without crashing, you can have a pilot's license. And she clearly did, while we have this amazing picture of her in an Indian sari with a Biggles-style cap on her head. But this is the lady that Persis is actually inspired by, the real first female police detective and inspector in India. But she came along, I think, in 1960. But as I said, I wanted to explore an earlier period, and she went on to become the Assistant Commissioner of Police. All right. So from Bombay we go to Delhi, because what I also do with the Malabar House novels is, in some of the books, I take Persis to other cities. So in one of them we go to Calcutta, which was the first capital of British India, and we look at the amazing history of that city. And then from Calcutta, the British set up shop in Delhi. And the latest book in that series, the paperback has just come out, it's called City of Destruction. And in this book, we begin literally with a bang when Persis stops a young man from assassinating, at a rally in Bombay, India's new Home Minister who's calling for war with Pakistan. But before he dies, he whispers something in her ear and hands her something. And these act as clues that send her off to Delhi to try and find his co-conspirators. But more importantly for her, because it's weighing on her conscience, the fact that she's killed this young man, why did he do it? Why would this young man throw away his life in this fashion? And so we get to explore Delhi, which is an ancient city, and it's many different empires have ruled over Delhi, including famously the Mughals. So that's where the Peacock Throne was, and you'll be familiar with the Peacock Throne because the Peacock Throne contained the Kohinoor diamond, which of course was later taken and gifted, shall we say, to the British Queens, and it remains now in the Tower of London. And every few years, Indians will get up and demand for it back and shake a fist at Britain, and Britain will say, no, we've got it, so we're going to hang on to it, thank you very much. Anyway, so that book is, so that what also happens when she goes to Delhi, which is of course New Delhi now and the political center of India, she comes across MI6. And this was like news to me. I had no idea that MI5 and MI6 had maintained small offices at the behest of the Indian government because India was trying to work out its own intelligence setup. And so they asked MI6 and MI5 to help them with that. And so Persis ends up, there's a certain part of the plot that involves talking to these guys. And of course, that's old India. That's the old fort, the Red Fort in India. Okay, so from there, I better keep an eye on the time. We've already done sort of 500-600 years, haven't we? Where have we gone? 324. So we end up then complete departure. I decided to write this book, which is The Girl in Celle, because I love psychological suspense fiction, through psychological thrillers, and I ended up setting this book in small town America. And the story here is that we're in a small town called Eden Falls. It's a fictional town it's not the deep south, I call it the shallow south. It's just under the Mason-Dixon line. And it's a wooded mining town run by the dynasty that established the mining empire there called the Wyclerks. And my lead character, Oriana, is a 17-year-old daughter of the housekeeper of the Wyclerks, is accused of murdering the golden son of the dynasty. She claims she didn't do it, claims she can't remember what happened that day, but she's convicted and sent off to prison. And so the book proceeds in two alternating first-person narrators. One is Oriana's therapist in prison who's trying to open the black box of her memory and take her back to her childhood and then to the events leading up to that killing. And then the other is 18 years later in Oriana's own voice when she's completed her prison sentence and she decides to go back to Eden Falls to try and figure it out for herself. And of course, places like this, time stands still. The Wyclerks are still in charge, ruled by Amos, who is one of these ruthless, wealthy patriarchs. You can think Brian Cox in Succession or Kevin Costner in Yellowstone, and who blames her for murdering his son. And the townspeople, of course, are set against her, and we have a cast of that sort of lovely cast that I love about small-town American fiction, the pot-bellied mayor and the overbearing police chief and the failed high school quarterback and all the rest of it. And so it becomes a murder mystery with Oriana moving around, talking to people, investigating, trying to figure out who did it. But the crux of it is that she can't be sure. She doesn't know if she didn't do it herself. And that's what the other strand is gradually breaking open her memory to see how we get. And of course, you have lots of twists and turns, and then a big twist at the end. So I loved writing this book. As I said, it came out earlier this year. It nearly killed me because I ended up in the first version was in third person. So I wrote 100,000 words in third person, and then I realized that actually this kind of fiction is much more immediate and draws you in a lot more if it's in first person. So trying to change 100,000 words from third person to first person, honestly, I'd rather stab myself in the nether regions with a fork than do that again. Anyhow, so still keeping an eye on time. So now we move on to what I'm doing at the moment. So I'm still writing more Malabar House novels because they're very popular and my publisher won't let me stop. But I'm also now in the Bond world. Or rather, I should say, the Q world. So I was approached by the Ian Fleming estate to write a series where Q would be the central protagonist. And they would not be spy novels, they would be traditional mysteries pitched somewhere between Mick Herron's Slow Horses and Richard Osman's Thursday Murder Club. So if you like those books, you'll probably like this book, Quantum of Menace, and it comes out later this month. So the Bond canon, for those who are not familiar with it, was relatively short. It's only 12 novels and 9 short stories. But since then, there's been a very large number of continuation novels written by authors as famous as Kingsley Amis, Sebastian Faulks, Jeffrey Deaver, Anthony Horowitz, Charlie Higson, and now me. And of course, 27 films, which have made this a global brand. And in fact, the books they were successful from the beginning, but they really took off when President John F. Kennedy declared that From Russia with Love was his favorite book. And 7 actors have played Bond. Now you say 7. Well, we'll come back to that in a second. So Ian Fleming, of course, the creator. Now he lived a really terrific life, Ian Fleming. He was born into a very wealthy family, merchant bankers. And he went to Eton, where he was useless. He was useless as an academic, but he was very good at sports. So he won all sorts of awards for his sports prowess. And then after Eton, he went to Sandhurst for a bit, but he was kicked out of that, or he had to leave because he contracted gonorrhea. Because even then he was he was quite a character. And then his mum took charge of his career. So she got him a series of jobs. He was a stockbroker for a while. He was a bit crap at that. He did something else, and he was a bit rubbish at that. And he kept having inappropriate girlfriends, and his mum would make him give those girlfriends up, which was practically Indian, his mum, in that sense. And it was only when the World War came around that he found what he was actually going to be good at. So he joined naval intelligence, and he was the personal assistant to the chap who ran naval intelligence, who would later become the model for M in the Bond novels. And he was credited with all sorts of, he had brilliant ideas all the time. And one of the ideas he had was encapsulated in something called the Trout Memo. And in the Trout Memo, what he said was he likened espionage and deception tactics in war to fly fishing. I'm not a fisherman, so I don't know if this makes any sense whatsoever. But the Trout Memo led to something called Operation Mincemeat, which some of you may have heard of. And the thrust of Operation Mincemeat was that you disguise dead bodies as Allied soldiers or personnel, and you put in false papers claiming that you're about to do something, and then you drop them behind enemy lines, and then the Germans would be fooled. And I think they used this for an operation where they were going to attack Sicily, but they didn't want the Germans to know that, so they got some, I think it was a dead tramp, and they dressed him up, and they put the papers showing that they were going to attack somewhere else, and then the Germans were fooled into thinking there was going to be no attack in Sicily, so they didn't put any defensive forces, and then the attack happened, and I think there's a Colin Firth film about that as well. And there's a famous line that Ian probably wrote where he was saying, well, it's quite easy to get hold of dead bodies. We'll go to the military hospital. The real trick is knowing where to chuck them out of behind enemy lines. Anyway, so he after the war, he managed to get a job with Reuters as a journalist, and he got a brilliant contract. I wish I could get this kind of contract where he would get 3 months off every winter to go off and write. And he went and bought a house in Jamaica, and that's where he wrote the first Bond novel. He called it GoldenEye after an operation in the war. And the first Bond novel, of course, was Casino Royale. I think that's the original cover, but there's, if you Google it, there's so many different ones. I'm not 100% sure. And a lot of his wartime work, which was largely around espionage and deception tactics, and he also dealt with assault commandos. He had a lot of interaction with assault commandos. All of those things went into James Bond. But there's more than one James Bond. So let me introduce you to the real James Bond. So, yes, I get it. He's not as handsome as Pierce Brosnan, who I hate because my wife thinks he's the handsomest man on earth. So Ian Fleming was looking around for a name for James Bond, and he was experimenting with names. One of the ones that he wanted to use was Peregrine Carruthers. But then he realized that that would not work because Bond is a man of action and the books are about action and dark things. And so he needed a sober name. And he came across, Ian was a big bird person, right? He was a big bird watcher. And so he had this book, Birds of the West Indies, on his shelf. And he said, James Bond. And this is his quote, "That's the dullest name in the English language. I will use that." So this poor chap who is Dr. James Bond, the ornithologist, he was used as the template for Bond's name. But they became friends afterwards, so it was all okay. So I grew up with this Bond, Roger Moore, my favorite Bond. My dad and I used to watch him together. We were huge fans. My mum, not so much. Every time Mr. Bond got amorous on screen, my mum would make me change the channel so my teenage brain was not corrupted. A lovely man, apparently. There's a great story of a 7 or 8 year old at a French airport who was with his grandfather and he saw Roger Moore there. And he said to his granddad, look, that's James Bond. Can we go and say hello? His granddad had no idea who he was, but he went over and he said, look, my grandson thinks you're amazing. Can you please sign something for him? And then Roger Moore signed it as Roger Moore, and the boy began to cry. And Roger Moore said, well, why are you crying? And the boy said, well, I thought you were James Bond, but, you're Roger Moore. And then Roger Moore looked around like this, and he bent down to him and he said, I am James Bond, but I'm undercover. So apparently a very, very nice man. So we talked about the different Bonds. So here they all are, of course. I don't need to name them. I'm sure you're all familiar with who they are. George Lazenby actually gets a lot of stick because he was an idiot. He turned down a 6 Bond film deal. He was in for Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's a very good Bond film, actually, if you watch it. And he's not bad in it. He's tall, he's dark, he's handsome, and he just, he reads his lines and he's great at the action. And it's very poignant at the end because that's the film where he marries, and I think it's Diana Rigg in it, and then she dies. And sorry, spoilers. But he had a massive ego, and he fell out with the producers because they offered him a 6 Bond film contract, and his agent told him, "Well, this Bond phenomenon is going to die soon now. Why don't we go away and make spaghetti westerns?" Well, then he turned it down. What an idiot. But there was one more Bond, the 7th Bond, David Niven, who starred in the, best forgotten, in my opinion, he starred in the spoof version of Casino Royale. But what about this? What about the Bonds who auditioned or were in the frame and got away? Some rather surprising actors in that list. So David Niven, of course, wanted to do them properly. Michael Caine, but he was making the Harry Palmer, I think their series they're called. Oh, no, that could be wrong. But he was making another spy series. And so they said no. Oliver Reed. However, unfortunately, he was too drunk and rowdy. That's what they said. He was far too drunk and rowdy. Mel Gibson. Not really sure how Mel Gibson would have worked out as a James Bond. Henry Cavill, one of the who played Superman recently, but I think their feeling was that he's too muscle-bound to be James Bond. I think this chap is called Daniel Pilar, and he was in Dallas, and he was a Latin American, I think, but he certainly looks like a James Bond as far as I can make out. Lewis Collins. I loved Lewis Collins in The Professionals when I was young. He would have made a great James Bond, but he was also rather difficult. Clive Owens. I think he would have made a fantastic Bond, but he wanted percentage points. He wanted a percentage of the gross receipts of the films. And the producers said, "Get lost, Clive." So I think he did himself a disservice by not taking it. But the strangest possibility, that's Christopher Lambert, who is incredibly French sounding and a very bad actor, which may not have been a hindrance with Bond anyway, but I have no idea why he was in the frame. There's only one thing I can think of. He appeared in a film called Highlander with Sean Connery. So I think Sean Connery was playing a Spaniard with a Scottish accent. But anyhow. All right, let's look a little bit about history's greatest spies. So Sir Francis Walsingham, Queen Elizabeth's master of espionage and spies. So he was on a mission to root out Catholic protesters against the Queen. very instrumental in stopping the Spanish Armada. And he's quite interesting because one of his spies that he sent around was a chap called John Dee. And people ask often, where does 007 come from? And one theory is that John Dee, who was spying for Queen Elizabeth, used to send her secret communiques back, and he used to sign them 007, and the two O's were supposed to signify the fact that his eyes were representing Queen Elizabeth's eyes. And because John Dee was an alchemist, the number 7 was sacred to alchemists, and he used to finish it with 7. So there's another story about it being a number used in World War II classified documents, but I think that's a far more romantic story about John Dee and his 007 version. What about this lady? Oops, that's not lady. Mata Hari. We all think we know who Mata Hari is, but Mata Hari was a complete liar. She was what's the politest way of saying this? She was a Dutch lady. I've forgotten her name now, Margaret Zeta or something like that. Margareta Zeta, something like that. And she became famous because she used to put on these titillating dance routines. I think in France to begin with, where she'd end up shedding most, if not all, of her clothes. And so all of the bigwigs in the cities would come along to her shows, and she made many, many male powerful friends that way until she was eventually drawn into spying. But she eventually was accused of being a double agent, and they set her up with a sting operation where they released some names to her, and then those names ended up with the Germans. And so they arrested her and they shot her. And apparently, as she was about to be shot, she was still busy flirting with the firing squad. So there you go, a resilient woman. And of course, Kim Philby, many of you will have heard of Kim Philby. I mean, the astonishing story of Kim Philby is that he was at the heart of the British intelligence machinery, and they suspected him of spying. But then they cleared him, and then they gave him a promotion. And so he just did even more of it until the end he was rumbled, along with another set called the Cambridge Five, I think. And then he managed to sneak off to Russia. So much so that he was given, they kept tabs on him, but he was generally fated in Russia as being possibly the most successful ever spy put into the British setup. So much so that they put out a Russian stamp with his face on it many years. All right, but what about Q? Because my book, Quantum of Menace, it's Q who's in the lead here. So how many people have played Q? So you'll recognize 3 of them. But the first one, so Q begins as Major Boothroyd. He doesn't appear in the books very much at all, but he begins as Major Boothroyd. So I think that's Peter Burton, but I could be wrong because I don't have my notes in front of me. But this is who Q is based on. So this was a gun expert called Geoffrey Boothroyd. Flamboyant character, as you can see. He wrote to Ian Fleming and he said, I read your Bond books, but you've got Bond using, not my words, his words, a lady's gun, because he was using a Beretta. And he told him that he's got to make him use a different weapon. And Ian Fleming wrote back and said, okay, fine, advise me. And so he became Fleming's advisor on the series. So Fleming gave Q, whose name is Major Boothroyd, Boothroyd's name. Could find the time. But this is the real Q. So this is Blaise Metroelli, who is the Director General of Technology and Innovation in MI6. So the person who's tasked with keeping field kit and weaponry up to spec at the cutting edge. She is now just taken over, as of the 1st of October, as the first female head of MI6. The first C. They're not called M, they're called C. And they're called C because of this chap, who was the very first chief of SIS, Sir Mansfield Smith Cumming. Very interesting chap, very colourful. He had a wooden leg, and he would put off his visitors by stabbing at it behind the thing, because he just wanted to test their mettle and whether or not they would be disconcerted by them. But he had a habit of signing his letters in green ink as C, and that's why the head of Q branch is known as C. Oh, sorry, I've covered this story already. I was going to come to it. So this is why 007, that's John Dee. What about real spy gadgets? What about this? The poison-tipped umbrella which was used on I think it's London Bridge or Waterloo Bridge in London years ago by the Russians to kill this chap, who was, I think, a Polish dissenter. Could be slightly wrong there, but he was a dissenter. He didn't like the Russians, and they stabbed him with this umbrella, and he died horribly in prison 4 years later. I quite like this one. Whoops. Pigeon cameras. You strap the cameras to the pigeons, fly them over the battlefield, get lots of battlefield photographs. I'm not sure if the pigeons were quite enamored of what they were forced to do, but they were homing pigeons, so they came back. They got lots of useful footage. And then this one, the lipstick pistol ladies. Look at that. Just one tiny bullet, but enough to do the job. Enough to do the job. And what about Q branch? Oh, God, there's been some lovely inventions, haven't there, over the years? What about this, the bondola? I mean, this deserves points just for whoever came up with bondola. Amazing. The seagull snorkel. And amazingly, he managed to carry off the rest of the film being very serious. I can't look at this without breaking down in laughter. I mean, that is Q demonstrating his rocket launcher. I mean, just a few inches higher, and he would be in serious trouble, wouldn't he, with that particular invention? What about this guy? So Timothy Dalton is actually one of my favorite Bonds because he played it, as Bond is written in the books, a very serious man, a dark assassin, rather than a comic. So explosive toothpaste. And I love the title they've given it. Dentonite blows you away. I mean, this was just stupid, wasn't it? And the invisible car. Everybody hated this film because of the invisible car. What about this? Tea time will never be the same again. So do you remember the chappie who just throws this and decapitates people with the tea tray? There you go. High tea has a new meaning. Any Scots in the audience? Huh? There you go. Bagpipe, lethal bagpipes. He's playing his little tune and then he takes it out and then he flamethrowers everybody. And this is quite a nice thing. And I only put this up because Q and Ian Fleming were not always that far of the mark with where technology was going. Because now, if you've got a few $1,000s to spare, you can buy this. This lovely dog that can change color, that can speak to you, it's connected to the internet, follows you around. Apparently it rolls over, sits up and begs. And there's thousands and thousands of these kind of newer robotic products out there. Okay, let me quickly tell you about the book before we wind up. So Quantum of Menace, Q, it's set in the modern day. Q's booted out of MI6 for political reasons. He's a 50-year-old man, so he's neither Desmond Llewellyn nor Ben Whishaw. He doesn't know what to do with himself. He's got no family. And then he gets a letter, a cryptic letter from his childhood friend, who is a quantum computer scientist, drawing him back to his small hometown in the home counties, just a couple of hours out of London, called Wixton-on-Water. His friend has recently died under mysterious circumstances, so Q feels compelled to come back to Wixton-on-Water to try and reinvestigate the death. And that pits him not only with the murder mystery, which is a traditional murder mystery, lots of clues, red herrings, suspects, etc., where Q has to use his intelligence to solve the mystery, but it also pits him against his past. So, for instance, he discovers he's been estranged from his father for 30 years, and his father is this very crusty, cantankerous 78-year-old Roman historian, because I love history, and it gives me a chance to put a few nuggets of Roman history in. And so he has to deal with that, but he also has to deal with the young lady who was his childhood sweetheart and his fiancée, who he jilted practically at the altar. And he discovers that she has actually qualified as a police detective and is the detective chief inspector who was in charge of this investigation of his childhood friend's mysterious death. And she's put it to rest, and now he wants to rake it up again. And she, of course, is not best pleased to see this man who jilted her 30 years ago. So we've got lots of personal dynamics. We've got a man essentially at sea trying to find his way in the world again. And, you know, it's all couched in what I hope is quite a good murder mystery. And, of course, you can see the likes of Mick Herron and others saying lovely things about the book. What is a quantum computer? A lot of people ask me. Well, I don't go into it in great detail in the book because this book is essentially, it's entertainment. It's not a big research piece. But that's a quantum computer. It will change the world when they come online. They're very shiny, but you can't steal them, as I discovered. I can't put it in my pocket. And if you're scared of artificial intelligence and what that can do, when these actually become properly operational, you should be very, very afraid how criminals can use this. And you know, I have worked in a research center that's a crime and security research center at University College London, so I know exactly where this technology is going, and it sort of feeds into the plot, although it's, as I said, a local hometown plot. And Q has to have a car, right? Because all Bond has a car, so Q needs his own car. So this is Q's car. It's called a Caterham. I'm at the Caterham factory. They invited me to visit once they knew it was going to be in the book. So you can build this car yourself. So that's why I thought it would be quite appropriate for Q. And I've just spent last week 2 days signing this book because it looks like it's going to be quite popular. So signing lots of special editions. I'm hidden behind that big pile there. There's a blue edition, there's a Waterstones edition, there's an independent bookshop edition, and they'll be coming out. And we've got a lovely audio book narrated by Alexander Armstrong. So all the signs are good. And so you are the first people in the world who are going to see this. They've just sent me a holding cover for the second book, which will be The Man with the Golden Compass. And you get a couple of chapters. If you buy that book, you get a couple of chapters at the end of that book because I've already written them. I should say this is probably the first time in my career that I've been allowed to keep my own titles. They never let you keep your own titles. So this is what it looks like. So it'll be lovely golden foil on top of that hardcover. So there you go. And of course, it's available to pre-order now. Not the dog, the book. The book is and do pre-order from your independent bookshop, who are really lovely, and we need to support our independent bookshops as much as we possibly can. Okay. So I promised in the description that we'd have time for a quick riddle. And what I'll do is, I wish I could give you this, but I've just received my copy of Quantum of Menace, because that's what it looks like. It's got this silver foil, and it's looked lovely. I want to tease you with it, but I can't offer it. But I will offer to give away this, which is an anthology of quite famous crime writers who have written short stories for something called The Perfect Crime. So this will go to whoever can solve this puzzle. So I'll read it out. So this refers to something in India. So from sacred high and it'll be first hand up. That's it. And if you get it wrong, I have a button here that I will press and you go into a Shark Tank. Right. From sacred high to earthy low, the contours of my body go. Consort 2-3 gods of old. Beneath starry skies my mists unfold. Countless souls my daily reaping. Yet life I bring while least lie sleeping. Do we have any puzzlers in the audience? Oh, there goes a hand. It is the Ganges, sir. Very well done. Okay, so it's a sacred river. I'll explain it. It's a sacred river in India. Comes down from the mountains, and it's considered to be a goddess in India. And she's a consort to 3 different gods. And then, of course, each day, Hindus they put their dead bodies' ashes after they're cremated into the Ganges, so daily reaping of souls. And that last word, that's an archaic word for fields, because of course the Ganges also waters all the fields of the lower plains of India. So well done, sir. So you come up and take your book in a bit when we finish. And I think that brings me to the end of, yes, we're perfectly on time. We've got 10 minutes for questions. And you can ask me anything you like, including about cricket if you really feel the urge.
This is on. Coming over.
Hi there. I'm interested to know, obviously the Bond films went from being fairly straight and serious and then a bit ludicrous and all for laughs and much more about the laughs than the story in a way, and it became a bit inane and ridiculous. And then with Daniel Craig, it's sort of gone back to a bit of a, not 50-50, but much more about the serious Bond and with a bit of humour. Where does your Q series kind of lie in that ludicrous kind of situation? Yeah,
so I may have said, but they sit somewhere between Slow Horses and Thursday Murder Club. So Q's a serious man. He takes his mission very seriously. For 3 decades, he and Bond have essentially tried to stop the evils of the world from proliferating. And we have to bear in mind that they're behind closed doors. And I don't think people like Bond, the real-life Bonds, or the one in the book, get enough credit. Because essentially, someone like James Bond is putting his life on the line. But if he dies tomorrow trying to protect a way of life that we all hopefully believe in democratic nations, he will get very little credit. Because he can't publicly be named, he can't publicly be feted. And Q and Bond have this enduring relationship, so that even after Q's kicked out of MI6, he and Bond stay in touch because they believe in that mission in a very vastly changing and different world. So the tone is serious, it's a proper traditional mystery, but there is lots of dry humor and observations like a Mick Herron or a Richard Osman. So it's not a spy novel. If you want a spy novel, I'm afraid this book's not for you. But if you like a good puzzling murder mystery with a bit of dry humor along the way, then probably it is.
We're heading back.
Hi. I just wanted to ask about the Inspector Chopra novels, because I love them. It's, first of all, a really silly question. How big is the elephant? And because when I imagine him, I never quite know how tall.
It's only that big.
Okay.
It's only that big. So it's 1 year old, and it never gets any older because then it wouldn't work.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. You know, what happens to the elephant?
Yeah, it never gets any older, and the books still sell, and people write to me from around the world, and they're usually 2 questions. One is, when are you going to write another one? And the second is, make sure nothing happens to that bloody elephant. It's just become a star, and I just never even thought the book would be published. So it's essentially given me a career, that baby elephant.
I love your book jackets. I've got a real sense of your brand from looking at them. You implied a fairly spiky relationship with your publisher on matters of marketing, but I wonder do you leave it to them or do you do it yourself?
Oh, no, I insert myself wherever I can. I do them a disservice. My publishers have been absolutely amazing. I mean, without them, I've been with the same big publisher for 11 years now. And I have another big publisher now for Quantum, and they've been amazing too. So I don't mean any disrespect to them at all. But I like to get involved. And all I ever asked from them, which they've delivered in spades, is, can you make the covers not just appealing, but representative of what the books are about thematically? And I think they've really captured the essence of India with the Malabar House and the Chopra novels. And with Quantum of Menace, I couldn't have asked for a more beautiful book. I really couldn't. And I think with the big Q and the silver foil and all the rest of it, it's just going to be a lovely product and a lovely present for Christmas. We can't stop selling. We have to. Otherwise, we'll be run out of town by our publishers.
Can I ask you, how are your books received and thought of, your Indian books in India?
Yeah, I'm interviewed by the Indian press quite regularly because I was quite nervous to begin with, because I do go into the realities of India. We mythologize India sometimes in the West, right? We turn it into a land of swamis and snake charmers, and there's plenty of that. But it might shock you to know, but Indians don't get up every 5 minutes and dance in choreographed numbers in the streets. We're musical people, but not that musical. So I was quite nervous because I have a pop at politicians and I have a pop at the poverty and all the rest of it. But Indian readers have loved it. And so, I have lots of readers out there and I get interviewed and people say, well, thank you for presenting the country as it actually is. I love movies like Best Exotic Marigold Hotel and I love Slumdog Millionaire. But if you're born in a slum, you don't often win the lottery and live happily ever after. Your life is relentlessly awful. Thank you for the question.
Vaseem, I just wanted to ask you something about the James Bond novels, because I brought up on them and I just adore them. I've got old copies all dog-eared and foxed. And then when the movies started being made, I get deeply, deeply irritated by people thinking that is what the James Bond novels are like and what they're about. And I wonder if you feel the same, because as the lady in front said, they've become daft nonsense. They're not what James Bond really was intended to be about, because, of course, Fleming took him desperately seriously, didn't he? Right. And so I just wondered if you wanted to riff on that a bit.
Right. I'm under strict rules of what I can and cannot say. Otherwise, I'll be thrown out by the Ian Fleming estate. Look, my personal opinion is that everyone has their favorite Bond, and they have their favorite version of Bond. As I said, I grew up with Roger Moore, but I quite like Timothy Dalton and Daniel Craig because they're much closer to the canonical Bond in the books. But as I said, my wife thinks Pierce Brosnan is the handsomest man in history, and so she absolutely loves those Bonds. I think people find different things from the different movies and the different iterations. And now that Amazon has taken over, God only knows what direction Amazon want to take the series in. But I'm hoping they have learned from the fact that the Craig version, which was very close to a dark Bond, I'm hoping, because of the success of those, I'm hoping that they continue in that direction. Don't ask me who the next Bond is going to be. If I told you, I'd have to kill you. I don't actually know. My first question to them was, can I audition for Bond? They said, no, you're not tall enough for a start.
Much of their time, aren't they?
They are.
I mean, they would be considered misogynistic, I think.
Yeah, and again, that's another question, a tricky one. But, the estate knows this, and that's why they've evolved the continuation novels to suit a modern audience now. And with all books, I think you have to read them as products of their time. There's no other way to approach, because otherwise we'd be busy censoring all sorts of stuff, wouldn't we?
Absolutely. Any more for any more? Down the front there.
Where do you get your ideas from? And then how do you structure your day, to write?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'd like to say I just steal them from other people, which would be easiest. No, when I was reading Terry Pratchett, there was a brilliant line in his Discworld novel somewhere, and it's never left me since I was a teenager. And Pratchett said that there are endless ideas sleeting through the cosmos, just waiting for the right head to fall into. And I've always felt that I'm besieged by endless ideas, most of them absolutely bonkers and useless, but every once in a while a really good idea will pop along. And it's about trying to identify, and as you get more experience, you're better at identifying it. But it's also you lot, right? People write to me all the time, and they tell me what they like about the books. Occasionally they'll take me to task for making a historical inaccuracy, or sometimes just to tell me the books are crap. The worst review I ever got was somebody who'd read the Chopra novel, and he said, "Dear Mr. Khan, I started reading your book. However, I don't believe I have enough years left to get to the end of it. P.S. I do like the baby elephant, though." And my day is, I get up very early. I write for a few hours. I get up at 6 or 7. I write for a few hours. I plan my novels because there's lots of stuff going on. There's themes, there's history, there's cryptic clues and puzzles. So I need to plan them before I start work. And then my brain will give up around about midday. And then I try and find something else to do. Or rather, my wife tries to find me something else to do, such as all the DIY I've been neglecting for many, many years. Thank you for coming along, guys.
Thank you, everybody.